Hello and welcome to another podcast episode of Upward Trajectory. Today, I am so happy to be joined by Amanda Love. She is a registered holistic nutritionist and also a fibromyalgia survivor and expert. And I'm so happy to welcome her and have her on the show. Thank you so much, Amanda, for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm so glad to be here.
Yeah, well, let me start with kind of when we were talking initially, you shared with me some of your story, and I'd love for you to kind of share the backstory and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, so I was very sick as a child. I had a lot of immune issues and stuff, and I kept going to the doctors, and they just kept putting me on antibiotics. And so after high school, I did a personal training program, and I completed that, but I got super sick during that time. And then after the program, I was like, okay, I thought I would go into nutrition, but I was so sick and I was so exhausted. I couldn't get off the couch. And so it followed with multiple doctors, and I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia that year. Luckily, it was like 10 months later. But usually people with fibromyalgia don't get diagnosed till later in life. And so I eventually found a wellness chiropractor who tested me for food allergies, sensitivities, and find out I am very sensitive to gluten. I have a soy, egg, dairy. And so that started me on the path to recovery, but it took multiple different doctors and stuff. So
okay, that's interesting you bring up the food. So you brought up the allergies and the sensitivities. Are those kind of interchangeable? Is that the same thing?
Yeah, and mine were my gluten was super high. It was the highest he'd ever seen for somebody. And he said I actually have two genes, so one gene from each parent. So that might predispose me to the gluten sensitivity. But I find a lot of people with fibromyalgia, they have sensitivities, but they just haven't done anything, or they just haven't done it long enough to know. So.
Okay, so can you explain to us like fibromyalgia? What is fibromyalgia? You hear it thrown around so much, and you think of my mind automatically goes to like chronic fatigue syndrome and pain.
It's very similar to chronic fatigue syndrome. But with fibromyalgia, you have extreme pain down your body, you're fatigued, you can't get sleep, so you have all these issues, and then you might have some other health concern on top of that. So, but there's a lot of symptoms with fibromyalgia, so they don't know. I think they like to rule things out before they diagnose you with the fibromyalgia, because they're not really sure, like, and stuff. They do like it's called a trigger point test. So they touch all these trigger points all down your back and your legs and stuff. And then if you have 13 out of the 18, then they'll diagnose you with fibromyalgia, or they'll diagnose you if you've had the fatigue, the pain, and stuff for at least 3 months and it hasn't gone away. So
interesting. So you had mentioned that you were tested by this holistic doctor that you found, and he found a lot of food sensitivities and allergies. And so when you realized that, and I'm guessing you removed those all from your diet, what did you notice happening?
I noticed my immune system started to get better. I wasn't getting sinus infections all the time. I dealt with a lot of headaches like every single day. I was exhausted, and it helped bring up my energy and stuff. So, wow. But I worked with him for 8 months, but it takes a long time to get better, I think, personally. So just because you've done something for a couple months doesn't mean that it's not going to work. It takes time. So
yeah, that's a good point you bring up. Everybody's looking for that magic pill and the quick fix and I want to feel better tomorrow, and that's so unrealistic.
Yeah, like that's my big problem a lot of times with people is I think they want the quick fix, and I'm like, it's not one thing that's gonna fix you. So, and a lot of times people give out random health advice, and it might work for that person, but it might not work for somebody else. So that's why you go to the experts to actually get the testing done and stuff.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
you took the route of the holistic nutrition, and how are you doing today? Are you still having flare-ups, or have you kind of gotten it under control? How is that going for you?
So with the flare-ups, I don't have any flare-ups anymore. The well, I guess the last time I had a flare-up was a couple years ago, but that was because I was in extreme pain because I like sprained my ankle. So, but no, I don't have any problem with that. I still deal with some immune issues, but I always am looking for answers. So if somebody says to me, um, like I always am doing research, so people need to know that I'm not perfect in my health, but I'm always working on it. So I don't want you to think that you have to be perfect with what I recommend and stuff, because we all fall off the plans.
Yeah, so I was curious because I've seen a lot in ads and publications and
Yeah.
stuff these days, treatment for fibromyalgia through medications. And I was wondering if you researched or tried that at all and what your take on that is.
Oh yeah. So when I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia, the most common thing they recommend is physical therapy. And so I did the physical therapy for several weeks. It was so painful. I did the weight training and I did the swimming. And then I would come out and I was crying because I was just in so much pain.
Oh,
And then so they also recommended, well, actually, we saw like a pain center next door and we said, okay, we said to the rheumatologist, should we try that? And they said, oh yeah, you could try it. So I did the pain management, and they recommend 3 appointments. So what they do is they draw little circles all down your back, and then they shoot this huge needle into all the different trigger points, and that's
ouch.
somehow they think that's yeah, it was extremely painful, and your blood sugar drops. So right
Oh,
after, of course, you have to have some sort of sugar like cookies or juice or something, and they take the blood pressure and your weight and all that beforehand too. And it was just so exhausting. I'm like, I can't do it all 3 of those appointments. So
wow. So the treatment in essence was worse
yeah.
than the actual condition. Yeah,
Yeah.
that doesn't sound
I
effective.
don't know. It was a combination of both. Both were pretty bad. So
Yeah, wow. So it sounds like you found a lot of success with the food changes that you made in your diet. And now
yeah.
you are certified in holistic nutrition and helping other people. Is your main focus on fibromyalgia, or who's your client base?
My client base is people with fibromyalgia. It's enough. And a lot of times they'll come to me with other health concerns, and I've done a lot of like research, so I know enough with other health concerns I could probably help you, but I'll tell you right away if you're not the right fit. I don't want to waste people's time, because people go from doctor to doctor and they spend a lot of money. So
Yes.
it adds up.
Well, that's a really good point that you make,
Yeah.
because there's so many people that may have this that don't know. Are there any telltale signs or symptoms that you have found throughout the years that are like, yeah, you probably should get evaluated to see if you have fibromyalgia?
The extreme fatigue, the pain, the sleeping is the 3 main issues I hear about all the time. And people could get checked out at it's usually a rheumatologist that diagnoses you, but I've also been told by other people that a primary doctor would diagnose them. So
Okay, so you mentioned sleep issues. Can you elaborate a little bit more on what are the sleep issues?
With the sleep, it's usually they can't fall asleep, and then usually they can't get that deep restful sleep because the serotonin levels are, for whatever reason, those with fibromyalgia have very low serotonin levels. So
Interesting.
you feel like you've been hit like by a truck because you're so exhausted and you can't function for the first couple of hours and stuff. So
Oh, so you're just in a daze and then you're so exhausted,
yeah,
but you're just not getting that sleep again and again. It's just the vicious cycle.
yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds awful. So yeah, we definitely want to let people know that if that sounds like you, that you may want to be evaluated for fibromyalgia and look into some dietary changes that you can make. Is
Yeah,
there anything?
and
Oh,
the
go ahead.
doctors, oh, sorry. The doctors won't, they'll put you usually on the medications. So, yeah,
Interesting.
or
Yeah.
physical therapy.
So something to watch out for. That's all they know. So they've
Yeah,
not
it's
been
all they
trained.
know.
Yeah, from what I
They're
hear,
very,
there's no dietary training in medical school, so they don't know
no,
about that.
unless you're going to like a naturopath. So, but they are usually not covered by insurance. So that's the thing about that.
So in seeking treatment, how would you direct somebody who's seeking treatment initially to go about getting diagnosed? So, because you mentioned that, rheumatologists and primary care are going to want to just go right to the pharmaceutical and to the painful treatment options that didn't help you.
Honestly, I would say if they want to get diagnosed, they'll probably get, a lot of times I've had people already been diagnosed, but you could always ask your doctor and say, oh, do you think it's fibromyalgia? I mean, your doctors don't know everything, but they probably have heard of fibromyalgia, so you could ask them. And your next step is just to figure out if you want to go which way you want to go. Do you want to go the natural way, or do you want to go on the drugs? And it just depends on the person, honestly. I think
Okay.
a lot of times people want to take the easy route, but then the problem with the easy route is that there's a lot of side effects to those medications. So, and if you have other health conditions and you're taking other medications, that's all going to affect how your body's going to be and how your energy is going to be and stuff. So,
Yeah,
you
and
know, it's really up to the person. I mean,
so
there's a lot of bad information about fibromyalgia that you can't get better for fibromyalgia, but that's not true. And I'm trying to spread the word that nutrition plays a big part in fibromyalgia. So
yeah, you look very healthy and alert and not in pain. So and well
yeah,
rested. So I was going to ask back to, you were describing the pressure test where they go through these trigger points
yeah,
along your body, and I think you said
yeah,
13 of 18 of these
yeah,
points. Is
yeah.
that a pretty accurate test for fibromyalgia?
Honestly, I don't know personally. I don't think, it might not be the best thing. There is this test called the FMA blood test, and people could apply to, and it's a blood test for fibromyalgia to diagnose you, but I'm not sure. It's not been around long enough, so we don't know how it's going to be and stuff. So it's all just, I think we get stuck on getting the diagnosis.
Yes.
Yeah. And honestly, if you're dealing with the fatigue, the pain, and sleep, you probably have it, honestly. And you have to focus more on getting better than what the diagnosis is.
Okay. So that's
Yeah.
great. So the fatigue, the pain, and the sleep, if you've got those three things, we don't really want to be concerned with the diagnosis and the tests for it, but getting better. That's the main
Yeah.
focus that you want to concentrate on.
Yeah.
And
That's what I try. That's what I try to do. I can't, as a nutritionist, I can't say, oh, I can't diagnose you or treat you or cure you. And I think a lot of times people with fibromyalgia are like, well, there's not a cure for fibromyalgia. And I'm like, well, yeah, but there are ways to feel better. And a lot of health conditions you can feel better through nutrition and supplements. It's just getting the right ones.
Yes. Well, Amanda, I think you've brought a lot of hope and a lot of excitement, because I think that you are just looking at you, you're living with this, and I think you mentioned it's been 3 years since you had a flare up. So 3 years that you've been doing really, really well, and you're managing this with your diet, and that's fantastic. So is there any way that people could reach you? Is there the best way that people could reach you if they want to learn more or connect with you?
Yeah, so I do have a podcast. It's called Fibromyalgia Real Solutions with Amanda Love. I just celebrated 1 year last month.
Yay, congratulations.
Thank you. And so I talked a lot about sleep. So the best thing is to go to my website where you could sign up for a free sleep guide. And that way you get all my announcements about anything coming up, about my podcast, and everything is amandaleaselove.com. That's my website, and it's also my social media stuff. So
wonderful. We'll have the links ready.
Come join me.
Thank you so much for being on, Amanda. I think that you have definitely reached some people with a story of hope and of inspiration, that there's another side of fibromyalgia, and that's wellness. And that's incredibly inspiring, and congratulations to be where you are today and to be helping other people get to that point you're at. So thank you so much for being on. I really appreciate it. And
thank you.
Thank you. And we'll have another episode of Upward Trajectory soon. So please join us. Thank you for being here.